YouTube channel, Rashad Mitchell. I was going to save this live feed for 8:45, but I'd rather do it now, get out the way. I'm continuing on what I started this past Tuesday night with the Blood Brothers book about the fatal friendship between Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. So I'm going to continue with chapters 4, 5, and 6, and that'll be it for the night. So I might as well do it right now. Well, I have another big turnout tonight. If I get off this live feed. Right, we're going to continue on with what I read this past Tuesday, Blood Brothers book about Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, their friendship that was turned fatal. I'm going to get into that. All right, let's get into it. Let's resume. I'll be on here till like 8:30. Hello, Mike. I'm saying your name right, but thanks for tuning in. I'm about to read this book from the first chat. Karina Roca. Thanks for coming on. I'm about to read this book about Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. Stay tuned. It's going to be a great time listening. Thank you for subbing. Thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you. Tell a friend, share it, the channel. The best shit to come. Thank you. Appreciate the subscribing. Thank you. Right now I'm just trying to get the excerpts from this book together. www. I don't know what you mean by that. Best YouTuber. I don't know if you're referring to me, but again, I got a long way to go to be the best YouTuber, but I appreciate the compliment. So far, I got 11 people in the chat. Appreciate it. Got 10 people in the chat. I swear my pants were just on. Gray Mouse Productions. Right. In Cold Blood, chapter 4. This is chapter 4. What's going on here? What are you doing? Yeah, right now I'm reading a book about Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, about their friendship that they had between each other that came fatal. It's called Blood Brothers. I'm reading a book right now. I'm on chapter 4, in Cold Blood. Because a man doesn't throw a punch doesn't mean he can't do so whenever he gets ready. Malcolm X. When Cassius Clay answered the telephone one day in early June 1962, he had no idea. Let me stop this right now. Well, let's keep it going. When Cassius Clay answered the telephone one day in early June 1962, he had no idea that the call would change his life. It was Sam Saxon calling to invite him and his brother Rudy to Detroit for a black Muslim rally. Over the past year, Cassius had attended more Muslim meetings outside Miami, but he had not yet heard Elijah Muhammad preach in person. With more than 5 weeks until his next scheduled fight, Clay could afford to spend a weekend with Saxon. So Cassius eagerly accepted his invitation. A few days later, Sam picked up the Clay brothers in Louisville and drove them to Detroit. There was someone very important Saxon wanted Cassius to meet. When they arrived on Sunday, June 10th, they stopped at a luncheonette crowded with black patrons, sitting at a back table where he could watch the front door, surrounded by Muslim officers. In an assortment of supplicants, Malcolm X noticed Sam Saxon accompanied by two handsome, athletic men walking straight toward his table. Malcolm could see that they were anxious to meet him. One of the brothers, a confident young man with the face of a matinee idol, pumped the minister's hand and announced, "I'm Cassius Clay," which he assumed said it all. For more than 2 years, Cassius had been repeating his name, usually adding that he was the greatest and the prettiest fighter who had ever laced on a pair of gloves. When Malcolm met the Clay brothers, however, he did not realize that one of them was famous. He had not followed boxing, bet on matches, or read the new sports page since he left prison. Up to that moment, I had never heard of him, he said later. Ours were two entirely different worlds. They spoke only briefly, as Malcolm had only a few minutes to finish preparing his opening remarks for the rally, but Clay had already made an impression on him. There was something about the young fighter, some contagious quality, simply a likable, friendly, clean-cut, down-to-earth charm that intrigued Malcolm. He did not know it yet, but he would soon understand that there was a place for Cassius Clay in his world. In the early 1960s, as the civil rights movement intensified, so too did Malcolm's violent rhetoric. The Muslims, he claimed, lived by Lex talionis. We believe in a fair exchange, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, a head for a head, a life for a life. If this is the price of freedom, we won't hesitate to pay the price. When anyone questioned the nation's willingness to retaliate, he replied that a Muslim was like a boxer in the ring with his fists cocked, just waiting for the right opening he wanted. You might see these Negroes who believe in nonviolence and mistake us for one of them and put your hands on us thinking that we're going to turn the other cheek and we'll put you to death just like that. The time had arrived for the Muslims to punch back. On April 27, 1962, about 6 weeks before Cassius Clay met Malcolm X, a melee broke out between police officers and members of the nation's Los Angeles mosque. It all began with two black men standing behind the open trunk of a car, were stopped by a white policeman in a parking lot a few doors away from the mosque. So as the officers frisked them, a crowd of angry Muslims gathered. In a matter of minutes, chaos erupted. Shots were fired. The Muslims retreated for safety. Squad cars as backup officers rushed to the scene. Policemen raided the mosque and randomly struck black men with nightsticks. The next morning, the Los Angeles Times announced in bold print, "Muslims riot, cultists killed, policeman shot." When the gun smoke cleared, one Muslim, Ronald Stokes, the secretary of the mosque, was dead, another was paralyzed, and 5 others had been wounded. All but one of the policemen's bullets hit the Muslims in their backs. The LAPD booked 14 black men on suspicion of assault with intent to kill. The Times described the blazing gunfight like it was the shootout at the OK Corral. Beneath the newspaper headline was a picture of Stokes, handcuffed and lying face down in a pool of blood. When Malcolm X heard the news, he swept for Stokes, whom he had known since 1960. Enraged, he swiftly buried his sadness and prepared for revenge. In Harlem, he confided to his assistant ministers that he planned to organize vigilantes, but Elijah Muhammad ordered him to stand down. "Brother, you don't go to war over a provocation," he told him. "They could kill a few of my followers, but I'm not going to go out and do something silly." Muhammad sent Raymond Sharif to Los Angeles, where the supreme captain of the Fruit ensured that there was no coordinated retaliation. Without authorization to retaliate, Malcolm instead escalated his rhetoric. On May 4th, a week after the shooting, Malcolm had held a press conference in Los Angeles at the Statler Hilton Hotel and accused the police of murdering Stokes. 7 innocent unarmed black men were shot down in cold blood by Police Chief William Parker's Los Angeles City Police. He charged. He thought that Parker, who sometimes pronounced Negroes as Negras, was guilty of filling his own men with hatred of the black community, spreading lies about the Muslims in Los Angeles. Malcolm argued blacks lived under a police state just like the Jews in Nazi Germany. The following morning, Malcolm conducted Stokes' funeral at the two-story mosque, where more than 2,000 blacks packed the old stucco lodging hall. Although white journalists were barred from entering the building, black reporters told Los Angeles Times that the minister delivered a moving tribute for the Muslims' fallen warrior. Outside the mosque, hundreds of mourners lined both sides of Broadway, watching the pallbearers carry Stokes' body in a gray casket. Some men bitterly complained about Elijah Muhammad's warning against revenge. Others were so angry that they renounced Muhammad and left the Los Angeles Mosque altogether. If the black man was ever going to be truly free, they declared he had to defend himself. Standing near the hearse, a tall, lean black man with a shaved head, dressed in a dark suit, faced a photographer from the Times. Fixing his gaze on a camera, he struck a militant pose, raising his fist in what would later become known as a black power salute. His clenched fist signified defiance, assertiveness, and liberation. The Times didn't identify the man by name, but in his silent rage for justice, his gesture spoke eloquently about a burgeoning movement that had no name. Muhammad sent word that the Muslims should head out into the street and begin the war with the devil, but it was not the kind of war his followers expected. They would fight the white man by exposing his crimes, letting the world know that he was the devil by selling newspapers. The men could not believe what they had just heard. What were they going to do with newspapers? Roll them up and SWAT armed policemen like flies. Edward 2X Sherrill, the captain of the mosque, he was like, I want all of you brothers to take at least 50 newspapers. Be sure you pay for them right now at the door. Malcolm shared the brothers' frustration with Muhammad's passivity. He was even more outraged when all-white coroner's jury took less than 30 minutes to acquit the LAPD killing of an unarmed black man, claiming his death was a justifiable homicide under lawful performance of duty and in self-defense. The police shooting radicalized the black community, galvanizing the movement toward greater militancy and confrontation. The Stokes case further elevated Malcolm into a national political figure. He began thinking of himself as a leader, a grassroots organizer, and a voice for the masses. He spoke less and less about Muhammad's religious teachings and more about politics and current events. More important, the murder made him reconsider the nation's role in the larger struggle, calling for wider racial unity that transcended religion and its ideology. He urged blacks to come together against the common enemy. The events in Los Angeles deepened Malcolm's internal conflict within the nation. With Muhammad, who heard that Malcolm had called for greater cooperation with civil rights groups, he demanded that his minister return home. Brother, stay where I put you because the civil rights organizations have no place to go, he said. Muhammad did not want him leading demonstrations or agitating authorities or arousing greater attention from the FBI. The risk was too great. Malcolm was the nation's most prized asset, and Muhammad could not afford for him to go to jail or get himself killed. The Supreme Minister instructed him to play dead on everything. That was an order. Malcolm seethed. He felt like a tiger on a leash, reduced to nothing more than an empty world. His critics complained that he sure talked a good game, but never did anything. In Harlem, people saw him standing across the street from picketers, distancing himself from demonstrations. Sometimes he showed up at civil rights meetings, slouching in the back of the room with his hat pulled low. Elijah's passive response to the assault on the Los Angeles Mosque was an embarrassment. For years, he had been telling his followers that if they were attacked, they must be willing to sacrifice their lives in the name of Allah. Every mosque had captains, lieutenants, and soldiers in the fruit, preparing for the Battle of Armageddon. Now Muhammad ordered retreat, just as the battle was about to begin. The minister, Malcolm, bitterly complained to his assistant ministers should have done more. People in the civil rights movement have been brutalized. We haven't done anything to help them. Now we have our own brothers killed and maimed, and we still haven't done anything. FBI agents listening in on Muhammad's phone calls learned that he had become alarmed by his young minister's restlessness. He worried that there was no one who could control Malcolm, not even the messenger himself. Despite a phone call, Elijah warned Malcolm just before he hung up, I hope Allah will keep you wise. All right, so on April 26, 1962, The FBI's Chicago office sent a report to J. Edgar Hoover offering valuable information that could be used to discredit Elijah Muhammad with his followers. Informants divulged that Muhammad had engaged in extramarital affairs with women who belonged to the nation. Of those, at least 7 mistresses, most of them former secretaries, claimed that the messenger had fathered their children. Muhammad's harem was the worst kept secret made inside the nation. Over the past year, the FBI collected sensitive information about his affairs. Agents noted that Muhammad had strict rules about adultery, forbidding married men from taking up time with other sisters. A Muslim man accused of fornicating outside his marriage risks facing not only a trial before the fruit, but also complete banishment from the nation. Brothers were supposed to respect Muslim women, glorify them, and guard their purity with their lives. Although Muhammad claimed that Muslim women should be elevated on pedestals, they were also instructed to show absolute obedience to their husbands. Women were segregated from men during rallies, taught domestic skills and comprehensive courses where they learned about cooking, sewing, and raising children. They were prohibited from wearing cosmetics, short skirts, or pants. Nor did women conduct religious services, organize meetings, or make decisions about the family. If a woman questioned her male partner in any way, she could receive a hard slap across the face. In some cases, Muhammad made his lovers endure farcical trials, charging them with immorality for bearing children out of wedlock, violating the nation's moral code. In other instances, he lavished his mistresses with gifts using money donated from the nation's followers. He promised some of his young paramours that they would raise a family together. But most often, those promises went unfulfilled, and bitter women threatened to expose his lies. Some even showed up at his Chicago doorstep, ringing the bell, leaving their babies on the stoop. The FBI realized that if Muhammad followers learned about his affairs, the hypocrisy could lead to the downfall of the nation. The borough's agents recommended using carefully selected informants who would plant the seeds of dissension through anonymous letters or telephone calls. Specifically, they suggested mailing letters to his wife, Clara, even though she already knew all about his stripes. Then, Malcolm X, since 1955, he had heard whispers about Muhammad's infidelities. He discounted them as unsubstantial gossip, denying any possibility that the messenger of Allah, his personal savior, would ever betray him and his followers. But the rumors persisted. He heard them everywhere he went, from New York to Chicago. By 1962, increasing number of Muslims began abandoning the nation, forcing him to finally admit what he had suspected for years. In his solitude, Malcolm's mind drifted to the image of Muhammad groping young women. Some nights he couldn't sleep. Other nights he woke up damp with perspiration, panicked that the world would soon know Muhammad's secret. Scandalous headlines jumped at him in his dreams. At some point, he feared an investigative journalist would stick a microphone in his face and ask him, "Is it true, Mr. Malcolm X? This report we hear that." How would he answer the question? How could he come to terms with the idea that the man he had built up as a moral paragon was actually a fraud? "I believe he was divine, divinely taught, divinely guided," Malcolm later admitted. And it was only when Elijah Muhammad something in his personal life he found himself confronted with a moral question which he could not face up to as a man. And his failure to face up to that as a man made me begin to doubt him. Not only as someone divinely guided, but it made me doubt him as a man. And in the face of that, I began to analyze everything else he taught. Malcolm was not the only one concerned about the nation's future. Inside the Chicago headquarters, Muhammad's closest aides worried that his bronchial asthma and other ailments pretended a leadership change. With Muhammad spending most of the year in Phoenix and his son Wallace serving prison time for draft evasion, Raymond Sharif, John Ali, Muhammad's sons Herbert, Akbar, Elijah Jr. expanded their influence over the sect. The junta enjoyed their growing power and the benefits that came with it. They lived an extravagant lifestyle while Muhammad's mostly poor followers struggled to survive and pay a weekly duty of $3.30. In some mosques, the fruit demanded even higher tithes. Destitute blacks were urged to buy multiple copies of Muhammad Speaks, frequent the nation's businesses, and drop donations into collection plates during mass meetings. FBI informers know that Muhammad's followers were continually harassed by NOI officials for greater and greater contributions. Muhammad instructed his closest advisors to put churches, expensive cars, and homes for him, to provide him with bodyguards and servants, and to give him other manifestations of affluence. He even referred to the nation's relief funds as my checking account. In some ways, Elijah stoked his advisors' fears that Malcolm might reduce their influence in the nation. And in February of 1962, at the annual Savior's Day rally in Chicago, he openly referred to Malcolm as his heir apparent and chief aide. He also gave Malcolm the authority to resolve conflicts between members of different mosques. When Malcolm ordained him supreme authority by proxy, he gave Malcolm power that no other minister enjoyed, provoking deep jealousy among his rivals. Malcolm's enemies charged him with avarice, a baseless accusation. Although he had access to the nation's treasury, he embedded his wife for 4 years, lived on a strict budget, owning virtually nothing, not even the house they lived in. When he traveled, rather than pay for a taxi ride to and from the airport, he asked for a Muslim to give him a ride. He avoided expensive restaurants, collected receipts for every expense. He kept meticulous records of his purchases. Whenever he received money for campus lectures, he made sure that the checks were always written out to the NOI and not himself. In his ascetic lifestyle, Malcolm completely rejected his old life as a Detroit Red. Right, other things in this chapter talk about how Malcolm had no aspiration of becoming the supreme minister. He was uninterested in managing the national affairs of the Muslims or arbitrating disputes between Muhammad's children. He was far more concerned with the direction of the struggle for black freedom. So the more he talked about something, the right man, the more agitated his rivals in Chicago became. But after Stokes' murder, Malcolm no longer cared. He was on a mission. Now he would have to enlist for shoulders of his own. So if Muhammad wished that Malcolm would avoid further controversies, his hopes would soon dash. At a rally in Harlem on Saturday, May 26, he disobeyed Elijah Muhammad's order to stand down and suggested that Harlem's civil rights leaders coordinate a coalition against police brutality. On June 6, at a press conference, pressure intensified when Los Angeles Mayor Sam Yorty played a police informant's recording of Malcolm speaking at a Muslim gathering. Referring to a plane crash in Paris that killed white passengers traveling from Atlanta, he declared, "I'd like to announce a very beautiful thing that has happened. As you know, we have been praying to Allah. We have been praying that He will in some way let us know that He has the power to execute justice." Hello, Yut. Thanks for tuning in. Whoever liked the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We have been praying that He will in some way let us know that He has the power to execute justice upon the heads of those who are responsible for the lynching of Ronald Stokes on April 27th. And I got a wire from God today. He said over a course of laughter, "Wait, all right, well, somebody came and told me that he answered our prayers over in France. He dropped an airplane out of the sky with over 120 white people on it. Since the Stokes case, he said many blacks had asked him what the Muslims were going to do. We call on our God," he answered. "He gets rid of about 120 of them in one whop." I just like you and I subscribed yesterday. Right, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for supporting. Appreciate it. He gets rid of 120 of them in one whop, and we hope that every day another plane falls out of the sky, he said as the crowd roared with applause. Malcolm's comments shocked Americans, crystallized his image as a demigod who preached hatred. Immediately, civil rights leaders condemned him, and Atlanta's Martin Luther King Jr. council sit-ins against segregated restaurants and lunch counters out of respect for the city's mourners. That's my hometown. I knew many of the people who were killed. Many of them were leaving progress. When he was asked about Malcolm's comments, he answered, "If the Muslim leader said that, I would certainly disagree with him. Black supremacy is as dangerous as white supremacy." So continue through this chapter. All right, this chapter talks about how Cassius, Rudy, and Sam head over to the stadium for the rally. Cassius had never seen such a spectacle of dignified-looking black people. All the men wearing dark suits and all the women seated on the left dressed in immaculate white gowns and shawls. So Cassius stretched his neck as he watched an honored guard escort Elijah Muhammad. So Malcolm also magnetized Clay, drawing him toward the inner circle of the nation. He had no idea for the effect he had on the young boxer that day in Detroit, but he would soon see him again. So at the end of the rally, after Clay departed Olympia Stadium, all members of the NY were required to remain seated. Since Stokes' death, the captains of every Smiles had pressed their members to sell more copies of the newspaper. He told about how on July 29th at 2 p.m., Malcolm attended a fundraising benefit for Stokes' family at the Boston Arena. So the Muslims stood on the corners of St. Botolph Street and Massachusetts Avenue selling a special reprint edition of Muhammad Speaks, featuring gruesome pictures of Stokes that resembled the image of Emmett Till's disfigured face in Jet magazine. And a top-seed photo displayed Stokes lying on his back, his bare chest exposed with deep stitches, his skull lacerated, bruised from policemen nightsticks. Instead, inside the tabloid were pictures of black men tethered to trees and hanging from nooses. In an open letter to five black congressmen, Malcolm argued that Stokes was as innocent as Mac Parker, Emmett Till, and Isaac Woodard, all victims of Southern lynchings. Despite the propaganda value of the Stokes murder, Muslim men in Boston resent the sales quotas which was imposed under the guise of raising money for Stokes' family. Let's see what else in this chapter. So I'll skip around a little bit. For a time, Malcolm decided that he should avoid the spotlight. He declined cover stories requests from Life and Newsweek and turned down a television interview on Meet the Press. He also noticed that his name and picture disappeared from the pages of Muhammad Speaks, and after Herbert Muhammad placed him as editor. Elijah resented all the attention focused on Malcolm, even though he made him the nation's spokesman. He especially disliked the way that people lionized Malcolm for his intellectual superiority and rhetorical eloquence. In Harlem, Malcolm had met with Cuban revolutionary Fidel Castro without Elijah's approval. Castro had been in New York to condemn the United States before the United Nations. At the time, Muhammad had suspected that the meeting would come back to haunt him, but Malcolm maintained we will welcome any investigation. We have nothing to hide. Malcolm may have believed that he had nothing to hide, but Cassius Clay did, because a month after UAC announced that it would investigate the nation, the heavyweight contender appeared in a photograph at the bottom of the page in the September 15th issue of Muhammad Speaks, dressed in a dark suit, white shirt, and bow tie. Clay seemed completely confronted with a smile for the camera, as if someone was snapping a picture of him and his brother at a family reunion rather than at a Muslim rally. In St. Louis, no one interviewed him for Muhammad Speaks, as athletes received little coverage in the paper. He was not yet considered an important figure in the Muslim national agenda. But for the second time in 2 months, he traveled a great distance to hear Elijah Muhammad and to spend more time with Malcolm. Clay's fascination with the nation had evolved alongside his growing notoriety as a boxer. At a time when the government planned an extensive, if unwarranted, investigations into the organization, Clay risked his boxing career by associating with the nation. Remarkably, the blacks who saw him in Detroit and St. Louis never shared that information with reporters. If a black writer recognized him at one of the rallies or noticed his picture in Muhammad Speaks, or a white writer caught wind of him shaking hands with Malcolm X, it could have ended his career. All right, let's go to chapter 5, the winter of boxing. Cassius Clay made a comment in Ebony magazine from the March 1963 issue, and he said the boxing game was slowly dying, and fight promoters were barely crying for someone somewhere to come along for a better and different song. Patterson was dull, quiet, and sad, and Sonny Liston was just as bad. Along came a kid named Cassius Clay, who said, "I'll take Liston's title away." Cassius Clay's involvement with the nation was not the only threat to his career. Prize fighting was in a sorry state and was dying in New York. because by 1962, everything wrong with the sport, from its endemic mismatches and ring fatalities to its shady characters and fixed fights, was magnified in Gotham. There had been a time when millions of Americans followed the big New York fights of Joe Louis and Rocky Marciano, and reporters trumpeted the results on the front page headlines. Now the coverage of boxing had spilled over into the crime pages. New York Times, as well as publications, national publications like Sports Illustrated and Time, featured the legal antics of promoters, managers, and fighters. To make matters worse, Sonny Liston, the most dynamic heavyweight of the early 60s, had a past so nefarious that he was far from fighting in the Empire State. Always the bellwether for the New York fight game, pealed as mournfully as a death knell. Boxing needed a heavyweight savior, and the old contender was rising more quickly or loudly than the undefeated Louisville Lip. The question was whether he could ascend fast enough to reverse the rapid descent of the sport. Less than a month after disposing George Lowey in Los Angeles in April 1962, Clay was back in New York for another test, matched against Billy Daniels, a former Air Force boxer who was 10-0 as a professional. The publicists promoted the contest as a fight between the two finest young heavyweights in America. The match was a disappointment. Only 1,642 spectators attended the bout at New York's historic St. Nicholas Arena. Neither boxer lived up to their hype. Daniels came out in the first and hit Clay with a powerful left-right combination. As the customers cheered lustily, Cash tottered and blinked his eyes, then went on his bicycle in an effort to avoid further damage. The second and third rounds, Clay came back. He bloodied Daniels' nose in the second, cut his right eyebrow. The third, it was a deeply ugly gash. Daniels' cut man could not effectively stop the bleeding. So in the fourth, Clay went to work on the eye. By the seventh, the blood was hampering Daniels' vision. At the point, the referee stopped the fight. The contest between Daniels and Clay may have been a slip for Clay, but it was no knockdown. He had won, and his undefeated record stood. All he needed to continue his ascent was a convincing victory over a contender. So he fought Alessandro Lavorenti in Los Angeles. He was bare-chested in November 1961, his fists up in the finest pose, appeared on the cover of the ring. He knocked out highly rated Zora Foley, became a ranked contender. But he fought too often and was brought along too fast. So on March 3rd, 1962, former light heavyweight champion Archie Moore gave Lavorenti a crude boxing lesson. Struggling to compete, swallowing too much of his own blood, the Argentine boxer absorbed a frightful beating. After the referee stopped the bout in the 10th round, Lavorenti slumped to the ropes, had been taken to his dressing room on a stretcher. So Clay dominated Alessandro Lavorenti from the opening bell, staggering Lavorenti in the second, opened a cut over his left eye in the fourth, and knocked him down twice in the fifth. The fate of Alejandro Lavorenti, who at the time was rushed to the hospital because there was blood clots that had to be removed and relieve pressure on his brain. The fighter never recovered. He sank into a coma. And then on April Fool's Day 1964, 19 months after his last boxing match, he died. He had arrived in America just over 4 years before. So the fate of Alejandro Lavorenti's epitomized the state of boxing in the late 50s and the early 60s. In the years between the emergence of the Joe Louis in 1935 and the retirement of Rocky Marciano in 1956, the sport luxuriated in a golden age of great fighters and matches, enormous attention and popularity, million-dollar gigs. When World War II ended, television, just in its infancy, fell in love with pugilism. And by the mid-1950s, a fight was being broadcast virtually every week, every night of the week. And so it's about here how the problems of the sport was years in the making. On March 24th, 1962, ABC's The Fight of the Week had Cuban Benny the Kid Perret against Virgin Islander Emil Griffith for the welterweight championship. The two had battled for the title twice before, Griffin winning the first in the knockout, Perret taking the second in a close decision. There was also bad blood between them. So, as the morning weigh-in, when Griffith stripped up to his underwear and stepped on the scale, the Spanish-speaking Perret moved in close and grabbed Griffith's blank, whispering, "Hey, blank, I'm going to get you and your husband." That word, maricon, which Gilbert Rogan of Source Illustrated called the most vulgar epithet in that violent idiom, and the touch enraged Griffin. His high priest's voice, tight clothes, and former career as a hype designer had started rumors that he was gay. He jerked away from Perret's touch, telling him to shut up and keep his hands off him, and he would fight him then and there. In the early rounds, the fight was close, but by the 12th, Griffin staggered Perret with several devastating blows. He landed punch after punch with deadly force, connected 6 or 7 times with right uppercuts to the point of the chin, then landed more and lefts and rights to Perret's face and temples in just a matter of seconds. He thought that Griffin had landed 25 unanswered punches. That's on Robert L. T. wrote for the New York Times. He felt that he landed 25 unanswered punches, so it might have been more, but the exact number hardly mattered. Perret was unconscious and tangled in the corner ropes well before referee Ruby Goldstein stepped between the two boxers. Goldstein pulled Griffith away from Perret, and the Cuban slowly slid from the corner ropes to the canvas. Ringside observer Norman Mailer later wrote that he sensed death in the air. Perret gave an unconscious half smile and then fell more slowly than any fighter had ever gone down. He went down like a lost ship which turns in its ends and slides second by second into his grave. The bout ended and the ring swarmed with activity. The senior ringside physician called for a stretcher while TV announcer Don Dunphy scrabbled into the ring to get a statement from Emil, after saying how happy he was to regain the title. Griffith had it. "I hope Perret is feeling very good." Ignoring the chaos in the ring, Duffy decided that the time was right to unveil ABC's newly developed slow-motion replay system. In nightmare slow motion, with Emil narrating his brutal Vita Bene, the last conscious seconds of Perret's life were replayed. The man who beat him to death provided the old color. All Griffin could do was describe articulately how he had killed his opponent. On April 3rd, 10 days after the fight, Perret died without ever regaining consciousness. His death introduced a new vocabulary into the sport. Phrases like traumatic brain injury, subdural hemorrhage, and edema sound like a foreign language to boxing fans, but reflected Sweet Science new reality. The horrible end of the Griffin-Perret fight had both immediate and longer-range consequences. While Perret was still in a coma, journalists and politicians began debating the future of a sport where the object is to knock an opponent loose from his senses. In the days after the match, the politicians demanded that New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller do something from a commission, ban the sport, or at least speak out against it. Ultimately, the state legislature formed a committee to investigate whether prize fighting should be abolished altogether. Perret died 2 years before the fight of the week did, but only because of existing conflicts between the network and sponsors. His death prompted industry executives to re-examine its relationship to sport. Boxing's television ratings have been declining for years, down from what about a third of the available audience to a tenth. By one, the national weekly shows that had appeared in the 40s and the 50s went off the air by 1962. All that remained was the fight of the week, which ABC aired from 1960 to 1964. The combination of ring deaths, criminal influence, public opposition, and declining ratings made ABC reconsider the renewal of their contract with the Gillette Safety Razor Company, which began sponsoring the show. The NBC canceled the Gillette Cavalcade of Sports in 1960. The fact that the Democrats of boxing were all wrong, that its audience was not only dwindling but also generally poorer and older, was as devastating as Griffin's punches. Increasingly, TV executives demanded shows that appealed to the youth market, ranging from The Addams Family, Bewitched, and Shindig and Hullabaloo, to the many loves of Dobie, Gillis, and Peyton Place. Not programs where men were battered, bloody, and killed. Boxing's core audience of World War II and of Korean War veterans. If you do this often, you need to read slower and pronounce your words better. Boxing's core audience of World War II and Korean War veterans from ethnic working class backgrounds with limited education. Disposable incomes were proven a poor fit for the age of John Kennedy, John Glenn, and the Beach Boys. 2 days before Christmas in 1963, ABC announced that it planned to cancel the Fight of the Week when its new season began. The program, which had begun less than 4 months after the D-Day invasion, ended on September 11, 1964. Harry Markson, director of boxing for Madison Square Garden, predicted that the end of the long-running show would not be fatal to boxing. In fact, he foresaw the very opposite, but his tone sounded off-key. Most critics thought that the cancellation of the Fight of the Week was another portent of the slow death of the sport. With boxing on his deathbed, Cassius Clay sensed an opportunity. He understood that there was a truth in that old axiom: the health of boxing follows the popularity of the heavyweight champion. What the sport needed, he calculated. What it was a dynamic, entertaining title holder. In view, Floyd Patterson and Sonny Liston, the two top heavyweights, were incapable of saving the sport. So only he could remedy boxing's ills. So at the beginning of 1962, Patterson held the title, which he had won in 1956 after Marciano retired, lost in 1959. When he was knocked out by Swedish Ingemar Johansson, regained in 1960 when he knocked out Johansson. Floyd was a good, compassionate, complex man in a profession normally dominated by men with other attributes. The crown of Dempsey, Lewis, and Marciano was an uncomfortable fit for him, a fact not lost on Clay. Cassius thought that boxing needed a champion who was great, not one who ran from challengers and lost to Scandinavians. Patterson grew up in poverty in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. As an adult, he was so timid and shy and withdrawn that even when he became a successful professional prize fighter, he could not look his opponents in the eye before a fight. After one match, he gently kissed the man he had just knocked out. Sport writers accused him of gross pugilistic malfeasance. That is, as a champion, he had not defended his title against the best contenders. Most of his defenses were against mid-ranked, smaller heavyweights with overblown records, who perhaps not coincidentally were white. He consistently avoided top-rated heavyweights. He steered clear of Sonny Liston, generally recognized between 1960 and 1962 as the top contender in the division. Unlike Patterson, Liston had fought and defeated virtually every other major contender. All right, let's skip over a little bit. I'll still about Sonny Liston coming up in the ranks, boxing, stuff like that. Patterson and Liston fought on September 25th, 1962, under lights at Comiskey Park in Chicago. It may have been the most talked about and written about fight since the 1938 rematch between Joe Louis and Max Schmeling. It was covered by some 200 sports writers and a distinguished collection of novelists and essayists. Less than half a year after the death of Benny the Kid Paret, they seem to have come to write boxing's obituary. Norman Mailer had been sent by Esquire, James Baldwin by Nugget, A.J. Lindblom by the New Yorker. They were joined by Gabe Tellis, Nelson Algren, Bud Schauberg, Gerald Kurtz, and a busload of others. Yet the great struggle to determine which black man would represent the aching hopes and smoldering resentments of black Americans was not much of a contest at all. Instead of staying away from Liston, Patterson advanced toward him, trying to slip under what he thought was a slow jab and get close enough to land hooks to Sonny's body and face. So Sonny banged away with several hard hooks. Then he pushed the left to the head that sent Patterson sprawling onto the ropes. As Floyd bounced awkwardly off the ropes, Liston hit him with a left, a grazing right, devastating left hook that half lifted him off the ground. Patterson dropped to the canvas like a man who had slipped on ice, landing clumsily and rolling onto his back. He maneuvered to his side, but managed to elevate his torso slightly. He hesitated, shaking his head at a few times in an attempt to regain his senses. He strode to his feet. He was too late. Referee Frank Sikora had counted him out at 2 minutes, 10 seconds of the first round. Got about 15 minutes left and I'm done for the night. 15 minutes. Right, so that's the fight that they had, the Liston and Patterson fight. So the next contender against Liston obviously was Muhammad Ali at the time of Cassius Clay. By 1962, in the fall of 1962, with shrinking television ratings and other boxing cards drawing meager audiences, money seemed to be fleeing the sport. Even the Liston Patterson match was a bit of a financial disappointment, drawing fewer than 20,000 fans to Comiskey in a closed-circuit audience, 40% below expectations. With those grim facts in mind, promoters like Cal and Aline Eaton took a cautious approach by staging the Claymore match in the Los Angeles Sports Arena rather than the larger Coliseum, and essentially excluded live radio, television, and closed-circuit theater broadcasts. So Clay and Archie Moore and Cassius Clay had fought each other. That was the matchup right there. The term was called the Battle of the Ages. Due to the fact that Cassius was a sleek heavyweight entering his prime. His face creased with age. Was old and flabby with a scar on his stomach. So that's why I call it that, the Battle of the Ages. So he beat Archie Moore. So he won that fight. So by the end of 1962, boxing was creaking back to life. Clay's saved sad year for boxing. That was a headline for the Los Angeles Times. It had been an awful year in 1962 because Perrette had died, Lavrenti was dying, Moore and Sugar Ray Robinson were limping towards the end of their careers. Liston and his gang had captured the heavyweight title. But in a series of matches in Los Angeles, Clay had revealed an ability to attract spectators. He seemed as if he often proclaimed the savior of the sport. Boxing savior he was. He had the golden touch, the gorgeous George magic that put customers in seats. He displays his special talent in November in Los Angeles against Moore, and then repeated in January in Pittsburgh against Charlie Powell, an exceptional athlete but not proficient enough a boxer to challenge Clay. A week after his 21st birthday, Cassius knocked him out in the third round. Yet in sub-zero weather, more than 11,000 fans, a local indoor record, paid to boo the undefeated boxer. It was just before this Powell match that, in a conversation with sports writer Mort Sharnick, Cassius revealed a different side of himself. Without confessing his ties to the Nation of Islam, he began talking about spirituality. He wondered why he couldn't have visitation from God. Sharnick recalled he was saying that Moses spoke to God, the prophets spoke to God, and why couldn't he speak to God? It was a curious observation. Sitting in a room in Pittsburgh, preparing to fight a powerful boxer whom he had dubbed Frankenstein, Cassius seemed more interested in his relationship with God. I had the feeling he sensed he was of a special vessel, that he might be ordained for special things, the writer recalled. Sharnick did not understand the source of Clay's power. He was unaccustomed to an athlete speaking so openly about deeply personal matters. But Sharnick had not spoken so intensely with Malcolm X, for whom profound religious conversations were common. Malcolm knew a man who did speak with God. In the months since he met Clay, he had followed the boxing newspapers. Watching his career blossom, it was time. Malcolm had decided to visit Cassius, attend one of his fights, and talk about a new message. All right, let's get into got about 10 minutes left. Chapter 6, Apollo. Coffee is the only thing I like integrated, Malcolm X. I want to integrate my coffee. I don't want to drink it black. Think I have my coffee weak this morning. Cassius Clay. Elijah Muhammad's children distrusted Malcolm. They were certain that he coveted the messenger's throne. In early 1963, they became especially concerned about their father's chronic bronchial asthma. If his health deteriorated, they wondered who would lead the nation. Then, as a scarecrow weighing only 125 pounds, Elijah couldn't shake a persistent cough. He was so weak that he sent a telegram to Chicago informing his followers that he could not attend the annual Savior's Day Convention, the holy day in the Nation of Islam. In its place, Malcolm would serve as a master of ceremonies, an appointment that drove an even deeper wedge between him and Elijah's children. In late February, on the eve of the convention, Malcolm met with Elijah's son Wallace to discuss the most urgent problem in the nation, the messenger's affairs. Recently paroled after serving more than a year in prison for draft evasion, he was shocked to see two women standing out in the cold on his father's lawn holding babies that they claimed belonged to the messenger. The women said that they would not leave until Elijah acknowledged the children. Wallace knew the women, he said, and shortly thereafter confirmed to Malcolm that the children belonged to Elijah. So I'm going to skip around a little bit. We got 10 minutes left. 9 minutes left. During the convention, Elijah's children complained that Malcolm had taken over. When they asked to hear Wallace speak on stage, Malcolm said that there was not enough time for him to address the assembly. The tension escalated when Malcolm called a family meeting and announced his plan to confront numerous problems harming the nation. Since meeting Malcolm 9 months earlier, Cassius had attended more Muslim meetings, ingratiating himself with the Harlem minister, but no one outside the nation suspected that Malcolm had taken an interest in the young boxer. Elijah himself had no idea that Malcolm planned to sit ringside at Madison Square Garden during his next match. When a reporter asked Malcolm what he thought about prize fighting, he called it a racket. Commercialized sport is the pleasure of the idle rich. He said, rich men, white men, exploited poor men who beat up other poor men. The vice of gambling stems from it. No one appreciated this better than Big Red. He was, after all, a product of the street, a form of sport who had lived the life of urbanity, gambling, and vice. It was the same world occupied by boxers, promoters, and hustlers who ran the fight game. It was a world of backroom deals, late-night escapades, and easy women. Malcolm nevertheless understood the cultural power wielded by champions. He had matured during the age of Joe Louis, the most admired and talked about black man of the 1930s. He recalled that in 1937, when Louis defeated heavyweight champion James Browder, all the Negroes in Lansing, like Negroes everywhere, went wildly happy with the great celebration of race pride over generations had ever known. Every Negro boy old enough to walk wanted to be the next Brown Bounder. Malcolm recognized that, unlike Joe Louis, Cassius Clay refused to let white men control him. The brash young boxer had shown an independent side and wished to play for the white man's rules, asserting his freedom in the world of boxing. Sometimes he defied Angelo Dundee's instruction and ignored his advisors in the Louisville sponsoring group. Many white fans and sports writers who disapproved of his loading in the ring would have preferred that he stand in the corner after he won a match, like Louis, gracious and expressionless. The fact that Cassius spoke his mind, attended Muslim meetings, and reached out to the minister, risking his career, convinced Malcolm that he was not the white man's puppet. Malcolm thought he could mold him like a lump of clay, sculpting him into a new kind of black champion, a champion of black nationalism. But to do that, to become the heavyweight champion of the world, the Muslims chant in a powerful voice carrying Malcolm's message, they had to beat Doug Jones. Cassius was in New York City to sell tickets, scheduled to box third-ranked heavyweight contender Doug Jones in Madison Square Garden on March 13th, 1963, faced a daunting promotional task. Jones was a very good boxer, small for a heavyweight, though a fine defensive fighter with a solid punching power. He had won 21 of his 25 professional matches. His three losses and one draw had been by decision to boxers of his caliber. Competent and workmanlike in the ring, he was undistinguished outside the ropes. He was most emphatically was not a drawing card. Cassius had to do the talking for both men, a task he tackled with relish. On February 3rd, on Sunday, February 3rd, he kicked off his campaign with an appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, a popular variety program, once a sports writer and still a boxing fan. Sullivan regularly introduced boxers on his show and plugged in upcoming matches. Sullivan tried to put the boxing at ease by asking him if he had a prediction for the Jones fight. I understand that Jones likes to mix, but he must fall in six, Cassius replied. Cassius had a deceptive personality. At the beginning of 1963, Cassius' magic showed the world a buffoonish, loudmouth clown while hiding his growing relationship with Malcolm X, his inner feelings about race in America. In public, he shouted, "I am the greatest," repeating doggerel and refining his Gorgeous George routine. In private, he attended Nation of Islam meetings and memorized the speeches of Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. Inside Cassius' Clay was Muhammad Ali. But for the moment, the magician kept that identity hidden. Let's see what else. Right. Also, it says that there was a strike for New York sports fans and gossip reports. It was like a city wide blackout. They had a strike going on. They had gone on strike against the owners and publishers of New York City's seven major newspapers, broken off their posts on December 8th, 1962, and not returned for 114 days. So the strike had a great impact on boxing. The major professional and college team sports have their seasons, with game schedules and times rarely available and widely distributed. But boxing has no such predictability. Matches are made and scheduled willy-nilly, and promoters dependent on sports rights to promote the contest by visiting training camps and interviewing combatants, generally creating the sense that each upcoming battle promised to be the greatest grudge fight since the Paleolithic era. It was the sports writers who award the pugilists personality quirks, created heroes and villains, and viewed the sport with drama. All right, this fight on March 13th, 1963, it was between Clay and Jones. So let's get into that. Doug Jones and Cassius Clay. See what the result was in this fight. So in this venue that was fought in New York, Madison Square Garden, people that were there was Jackie Robinson, Althea Gibson, Ralph Bunch. Malcolm X was at ringside. Looking around the garden, Malcolm realized that all the people that were there had to come see one man, Cassius Clay. He had never seen so many people drawn to an event because of a single black man. Not even Elijah Muhammad, he thought, could fill the garden up. Malcolm was joined by other athletic luminaries and politicians like Gene Tunney, Jack Dempsey, Sugar Ray Robinson. people like that. So this fight went longer than it did. He expected to go. Ali went to like the seventh round. In the last 3 rounds, Clay consistently landed 3 or 4 times as many punches as Jones did. Because this was a decision. So Johnny Addy approached the microphone. Both of the judges, Artie Adele and Frank Forbes, they scored in this way 5-4-1, even in favor of Clay. Catches had won and boos shouted the ring. Undeterred, the unflappable Addy finished his chores, though the booing made it difficult. Referee Joe Lacazos has it 8-1, 1 even Clay. The winner by unanimous decision was Cassius Clay. So he won by unanimous decision. So just after a week after he defeated Jones, Cassius' notoriety reached the landmark. He was featured in a portrait on the cover of Time, the country's leading weekly news magazine. The drawing had two main parts: a book and a man. The illustration of the boxer, how he looks like him. The skin is darker. The features were more coarse above his head. Two boxing gloves hold open a book of poetry, looking remarkably like a holy text. Together, the images suggest that Cassius Clay was a man of action and words, a warrior and a prophet. So the accompanying story portrayed the boxer as a simple athlete with simple dreams. I'm going to drive down Walnut Street in a caddy on Derby Day, and all the people will point and say, "There goes Cassius Clay." Pretty girls will be there. I'll smell flowers and feel the nice warm air. Oh, I'm cool then, man. I'm cool. The girls are looking at me. I'm looking away. This, the author of the piece implied, was Cassius Marcellus Clay, the fresh, innocent savior of boxing. The sum total of his dreams: a tomato red Cadillac Eldorado, the right woman in a heavyweight crown. The cover story, however, lacked depth. It laughed at Clay, noting his low IQ and uncomplicated dreams of material success. It brought his magic, seeing only what he chose to reveal. Nowhere in the article is there a mention of the civil rights movement, or the Nation of Islam, or Martin Luther King, or Malcolm X. There is no sense that he had an inner life, or that he wore a disguise as complete as those worn by the Scarlet Pimpernel, Sidney Carton, or Ellison's Invisible Man. Even in the spring of 1963, he was not who people thought he was or wanted him to be. All right, so that's it for chapter 4, 5, and 6. I'll be in chapter 7, maybe tomorrow, probably not. But that's it, man. That's it for today's book readings segment. I read excerpts from The Blood Brothers, The Fatal Friendship Between Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, chapters 4, 5, and 6. I'll be in chapter 7. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, maybe sometime next week. I'll see. But I will continue reading this book. Hopefully you enjoyed it tonight. Thank those who tuned in. Until then, talk to you tomorrow. I'll be on tomorrow night for another live feed. The classic books of Rashad Mitchell being Nehemiah chapter 10, 11, and 12 from the Life and Spirit Study Bible. And then I'll be in the Football Friday segment. I'll be doing that at 10 o'clock p.m. tomorrow night. So it's going to be 2 live feeds tomorrow. Classic books of Rashad Mitchell, Life and Spirit Study Bible, Nehemiah chapter 10, 11, and 12. And then at 10 o'clock, I'll be doing the Football Friday with Rashad Mitchell. So that'll be like 7:45. I do the classic books with Rashad Mitchell, the Life and Spirit Study Bible, get into the Word of God. And 7:45. Then at 10 o'clock, I'll be in talking about the Football Friday, college football, and NFL. So until then, have a good night.